Doing this afternoon. Clearly, we are recording now. If you are not ready to be recorded, you may want to get off of the Zoom. But I imagine since you're here, it's okay. Today, we are going to talk about cultivating stress resilience, and you're going to be joined today by my cohort, colleague, and ultimately the master of ceremonies, the illustrious Maya Bird. She will be joining us today as we walk through strategies to cultivate your stress resilience. A couple of things that you're going to need for today's session is that you're definitely going to need your paper and a writing utensil. It doesn't have to be a pencil. It could be a pen. It could actually be a marker. But we're definitely going to need a few pieces of paper. There's going to be a few activities that we do that are going to be fun, that are going to be opportunities for you to really think and reflect on the things that you have going on in your life. And yeah, let's get right into it. A couple logistics before we get started though. Make sure that if you haven't already, enable your video, mute yourself unless you're going to be talking. We may be using a chat box here and there, so prepare yourself for that. And then also update your name and add the initials of your organization. That will just make it really easy for us to have these conversations, especially also sending you back and forth to groups today. But let's get right into it. So today, what we have planned is that we'll take a little time to talk about stress resilience and how to navigate stress as you are in the middle of potentially one of the most stressful months, years, 18 months in the history of the world. But before I jump into this, I really want to set the stage with a video. And this video really just talks about how stress can impact people and how stress has impacted individuals. And I'm actually going to take this clip that I found on YouTube from Michael Phelps. Everybody knows the Olympics literally just ended last week. But what I want you to do as you watch this video is I want you to begin to separate the day. And I really want everybody to take a moment and think about all the things that you have experienced in the last 18 months, or all the things that you've experienced in the last 30 days, or even the last 8 hours, right? You could have had a crazy, extremely stressful day today. And what I want you to do, this is a safe space today. What I want you to do is I want you to go into this conversation and I want you to answer this question. Who in your life can you trust to provide support when you are stressed? And what strength do you see in this person? We're going to break into groups of threes. We're going to give you about 7 minutes to have this conversation. And then when we get back, I really want individuals to share. As a way to kind of like model the way, the person I actually call on the most when I'm the most stressed out is actually one of my best friends, Kevin. I've had the same 3 friends since like the 7th grade, but I've known Kevin since I was like 7 years old. And he is the person who consistently gives me insight into the way that I think about things, and to the way that I'm potentially approaching things with the wrong mentality. And this is the person I can consistently call more than anybody else to like support me when I'm stressed out. So yeah.
Could you make me host real quick?
Okay.
I love that you have that long-standing friendship.
Yeah.
I had a friend, Ben, tell me that it's a few weeks ago. He was like, it's a blessing to have a friendship measured in decades.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely true.
Because we just passed the decade mark at like 12 years. We've been.
That is awesome. Now that I think about it, we've been friends for like 3 decades now. We've literally known each other more than, this is crazy. But yeah, think about that person. Who in your life can you trust to provide support when you're stressed? Is it your wife? Is it a brother, a sister, a mom, a dad? Who is that person in your life?
While we're waiting to be split into rooms, congratulations to all of you at Mayerson for your job crafting, role evolutions, and
Thank you so much,
Stretching,
Jeff.
that was a
Appreciate
great, I emailed Jillian. That might have been the best email like that I've ever read in my life. Celebrating the strengths and opportunities that you all have and are going to be moving into. So all
Yeah.
well deserved. Congratulations to you all.
It is a really exciting time at Mayerson Academy. If
Appreciate it. I'm gonna send you guys into your rooms. Monica, did you get your breakout room?
to share with me who in your life can you trust to provide support when you're stressed out? Two people. All right, Janice.
Oh, sure. Because my husband, we're halfway traveling. We're in Denver right now, but he's sitting across from me, and it truly is my husband. And it is because he sort of combines, it's the love for sure, but he's also, it's all about forgiveness, because usually when I need support, it's because I'm having some kind of mini meltdown. And he like gives me that 5-minute meltdown moment, forgives it, and then counsels me into, like figuring it all out. And so I'm really grateful for that.
That is awesome. And the strength is love?
Love, no, forgiveness though. I think love,
Nice.
forgiveness. He forgives
Nice.
me my crazy, yeah.
Well, thank him for that. Who else? Who else is going to share?
I'll share. I also said my husband, but I did say there are other foundational things that I do internally to help me. So like my spirituality is my number one via strength.
Okay.
So oftentimes when I'm working with my husband, it's because I'm processing something that I've already done some inner work on. And I just need like that next perspective, because I also recognize the limitations of being human. And when you're in a marriage, you don't want that person to be your everything. And
Yeah.
sometimes what we're going through may be a little too much for your spouse and where they are in that moment in their life. But I will say he's primarily the person. And then I also have like groups for different functions, like a mom group and a women group that feed certain identities of who I am.
Right.
But my husband, I would say the reason why, and I didn't say what via strength more so, but he just meets me where I am. Like, I feel like I don't get judgment from him. Like he truly just embraces me, and that gives me permission to
Yeah.
be more vulnerable to him.
Yeah. What you actually explained was this idea of psychological safety, right? My wife and I call it a safe place to land. And when you're in a world where there's like all of these things that are consistently bringing stress to your life, there needs to be one place where you can consistently go and just like let your guard down, right? And so just for a little bit of context around all of this, one of the things that we always talk about in the PERMA is this R in a relationship, right? And that's always defined as the creation of authentic, energizing relationships. And then according to Dr. Michelle McQuaid and Dr. Peggy Kern, the relationships that we have, they have a higher impact on our overall well-being, higher than any of the other 6 factors inside of the PERMA survey. These links ultimately include, well, I said they ultimately have impact on the following things: the anxiety that we have, sometimes the depression that we have. It's been proven to increase our level of self-esteem and increase our level of empathy. These relationships, these strong, healthy relationships, have been ultimately proven to strengthen our immune system. And so one of the things that I would encourage you to do, if you don't have a place where you can go, that is support system when you're stressed out, is begin to develop those relationships, because they're going to be huge for you. And the impact that you'll see will just be almost instantaneous. But a lot of us in this room, we know that we've done that a lot. But now I want to dive a little bit deeper into stress. And I really want to define stress as your body's reaction to a challenge or demand, right? And what we talk about is 2 different types of stress and the difference between the 2. But the first one that we have is acute, right? Acute is that short-term stress. It is usually like it has a specific trigger, and it has a very specific endpoint. And your body goes through this hormonal process of stress, but it also ends after the stressor has been removed. And it usually only lasts about 40 minutes, right? And after that, your body's back to normal. But one of the things that we found is that with acute stress, it can come on from a lot of different places. Lots of people say that they have a fear of speaking. Clearly, I'm not one of those people. But you know, the feeling that you get when you're like getting ready to do a speech, or the feeling that you get when you are getting ready to perform in front of other people, or the feeling that you get when you have to do a big presentation, or the feeling that you get when you have to have a hard conversation with a colleague. All of those things spark this stress to be able to provide you with a level of energy. It is actually from that fight or flight mode. But one of the things that we like to think about as it relates to this acute stress is like how we can begin to walk through or solve some of the problems as it relates to that acute stress. So one of my questions that I really want to ask you right now is, what are some examples of acute stress that you have in your life? And you can just type it into the chat. Janice is right there with me. She's at a new position and Joe's leaving. That is definitely an acute stress, right? It's a very specific moment with a very specific happening. And from time to time, I'll be stressed out for 40 minutes at a time, and then it will pass. And then it may come back. So Jeff actually said managing COVID for our organization. Jeff, we're actually going to talk about that a little bit more, because I think COVID may fall into a different category at this point. When my teenagers call me to come pick them up and you have work commitments, I'm right there with you, Chrissy. That is definitely a very specific acute stress. And you're like, I got all these things to do. Can't you catch the bus? Sometimes that's what mom used to tell me all the time. Catch the bus. David said a family member facing major illness. That can definitely be something that can cause you a very specific acute level of stress. Deadlines and juggling tasks. Maya, you're right there with me. All right, so listen, we have acute stress. Those are those very specific moments of stress that can hit you, and your body can create a hormonal, what do we want to say? Like just a hormonal process, the hormones that are created inside of your body for the fight or flight, right? But there's another type of stress that also occurs. And the second type is called chronic stress. And this is that long-term stress that involves repeated exposure to situations that lead to the release of stress hormones. And acute is basically acute stress repeated over and over and over again. And those sort of stress that happen over again, those ultimately can become chronic stress. So chronic stress slowly drains a person's psychological resources, and it damages their brains and their bodies. A couple of examples of chronic stress is having a micromanager for a boss, or just having a terrible boss. They can just create this consistent space of acute stress consistently all day, every day, till you get to a place where you're like not even looking forward to going and doing the work that you do. Another example could be a toxic relationship, or people with oppressed identities. So I really want people to type in, and Janice jumped on it. Is what are some acute stress examples that you have in your own life? Janice actually said global warming reports that keep getting more and more dire. That's definitely something that, you know, it's like one of those gnawing things that ends in the back of your head all the time. Like, well, what am I doing to help fix this? Is there anything that can be done? What is this impact going to have on my kids? What else? What other examples are there of chronic stress that you can think of? Yeah, financial stability, car issues. That's definitely can be one of those things that end up being a chronic stress for you. I'm totally there with you. COVID and the lasting effects of on organizations. Absolutely. So that actually brings up a great example and kind of segues into the next situation. Well, this next example that I was going to give is that the pandemic can be a form of chronic stress. We've been doing this all for 18 months, right? And you know, every day there's some new report that comes out that gives us a different perspective or a different fear or a different shock to our system on where it is that we're supposed to be going or how it is that we're supposed to show up in that place. Should we go get vaccinated? Should we not go get vaccinated? Should we wear a mask? Should we not wear a mask? Should we go to this place? Should we not go to that place? Like, and depending on what channel of television you're watching, it'll give you a different form of stress related to the pandemic. And so this is the stress that we are going to focus on today, because I know that I've been under a tremendous amount of stress over the last 18 to 24 months. I'm sure that most of us on this call have been under some form of stress over the last few months. And really what we want to do is be able to create a space where you can start to manage all of that. And so what we really want to do is really start to talk about how this chronic stress can have an impact on us, right? One of the more serious effects of long-term chronic stress is that it can cause burnout, right? So while stress exists on a continuum of acute to chronic, burnout is when an extended exposure to chronic stress affects your ability to recover and return to homeostasis. And when I say homeostasis, it's just like your natural state of being, right? Where you don't feel like you're stressed out, you don't feel extra excited, but you also don't feel extra low. Burnout is usually defined by three things. The first thing being exhaustion, right? The first thing is exhaustion, where you're feeling chronic physical and emotional fatigue. Eventually, this leads to detachment because it's a way to cope with the overload of the stress that you're feeling. The next thing is cynicism. And this is where everything and everyone rubs you the wrong way. And you begin to distance yourself from people, and you're starting to miss the vibrance of life and the uniqueness of other people, which results in less empathy and caring, which can create strains in a relationship, not only at work, but personally. And then finally, there's a space of apathy or indifference. And that's when you begin to struggle to find the personal resources to begin to thrive. And these feelings of indifference make you believe that nothing matters, and you have a lower sense of personal accomplishment or impact in your work or your home life. So burnout doesn't happen overnight, right? It is the effect of an extended exposure to chronic and or acute stress. It usually happens when we have not developed the systems or have access to the resources that will help us manage or eliminate some of the stressors that we have in our life. So today's goal is introduce you to some of those tools, some of those resources, some of those tricks that can help us avoid burnout. Because stress is going to come, but the goal for us is to be able to manage it as it does come. Does that make sense? You follow me? I can see your faces, so you can definitely nod with me. All right. So listen, let's talk about stress resilience and why it's important. So psychologists define resilience as the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress. That's always too long to remember. So I like this shortened version, right? Which is advancing despite adversity. That's simple, right? Stress resilience is all about it being able to continue in the face of adversity. Stress resilience isn't about avoiding stress because the stress is going to be there. But when coping with stress, it's important to try to avoid burnout. And it's also important to remember that our biological stress system doesn't have eyes or ears. So the only way that our stress response systems gets information about the world is through the lens of our perception. So shifting our perceptual lens can therefore produce real changes in our biological response to stress. So it's possible to change people's stress response relatively quickly and easily if the correct perceptual processes are targeted in situationally appropriate ways. That's what we're going to do today. We're going to build a resilient mind. Remember that this is really just about not fighting through, or not even not fighting through, but not saying that I'm going to avoid all the stressful things that can happen in life. What we really want to focus on today is just being able to have the tools to be able to manage the stress as they come. Does that make sense? Excellent. All right, so listen, today we're going to talk about 4 strategies for stress, right? The first one that we're going to go through is called reframe. That's when you're literally going to walk through how to reframe your stressors, how to get really specific on what your stressors are, and then how to reframe them in our perception so that we can begin to see them differently in our mind's eye. The second thing is we're going to talk about this idea of the hero's journey. And this is going to be a really exciting thing that I do all the time, where you like you take a step back and look at some of the hardest things that you've ever done in your life and what you've been able to do to pull through those. The third thing is where you start to think of stress as energy. And we're going to do a really fun activity where we're going to break down some of the things that are stressful in your life and how we can turn those into bursts of energy for you to move forward. And then finally, we're going to talk about resilience through purpose. But before we get started, we have to start at number one, and I'm going to start with Maya talking about naming and reframing stress.
Thanks, Phil. So one important way for us to build resiliency is to avoid seeing crisis or stressors as insurmountable problems, things that we cannot solve and they're just always going to be there. It's easy to get overwhelmed when we're stressed, and that can leave us feeling hopeless or at a loss to move forward. You know, how many of us have said before, I don't even know where to start? I say that almost every day or almost every week. I'm in the midst of this now with, you know, a major role transition and organizing all the new responsibilities and the duties that come with it. Why is that different than usual? So part of this is because we're likely dealing with chronic stress. There's just not one discrete thing. It's a series of stressors that, like Phil said, they don't seem to have a clear ending point. There's not a point that you can point out and say, this is going to be done at this time, but this is going to end. It's continual, it's ongoing. So what do? So first we need to actually name our stressors. So in my example, I said, oh, my new job transition and creating like a schedule and organizing is my stressor, but that's actually not the main stressor. If I dig a little deeper, it's going, oh, I've been working in the same tiny corner of my house for the past 18 months. I'm worried about my immunocompromised family members during a pandemic. I'm taking care of two very energetic dogs, a husky and a pit bull, in that same tiny house. And my husband's been on and off employment for the past 18 months. So all of those things together are making it so that scheduling and organizing are stressing me out more than usual. The schedule isn't the main stressor for my chronic stress. Does that make sense? It's just an acute stressor. So in our bodies, stress can feel like headaches, neck aches, stomach pain, anxiety, low energy. And I want you guys to take 2 minutes on that piece of paper that you have to write down what you believe to be your top 3 stressors causing chronic stress right now. So I'm going to give you guys about 2 minutes to write those down. When you're identifying these top 3 sources, try to push beyond, you know, those acute ones and think about the real source underneath that's causing that elevated constant stress. Give 1 minute. Okay, give me a thumbs up if you have your stressors on your piece of paper. Cool. All right, next. The next step is to actually map your stressors on a sphere of control chart. So what's in your control, what do you have influence over, and what's completely out of your control. And we're going to get into what those things are. So when you're overwhelmed under chronic stress, it can feel like nothing's in your control. And it's hard to feel like you can take action. If you're not in control, then what can you do? It's just here. But in reality, if we can look at our stressors more objectively and break them down, there's usually pieces that we have control or influence or leverage for. And the places that you don't they're not worth your time or your energy or your emotional capacity. Those are the things that you're going to have to accept and move forward on. So the sphere of control are things you can directly change. That's, things like what you eat, eating a whole bunch of sugar or junk food, or cooking food for yourself that's healthier. It's the amount of time you sleep in bed. It's the amount of the places that you can go in your house or around your neighborhood that can give you kind of that boost that you need. Sphere of influence are things you can't directly decide, but you can influence like the parameters of the item. So a colleague asks you to complete an assignment by tomorrow. The assignment still needs to get done, but you could probably still influence like when it needs to be done. You can ask if it can get pushed to next week instead of doing it tomorrow. So those are things that are negotiable. They're not things that you directly control, but they're things that are negotiable. Now, an example is my Post-it note on the screen, which is, if I look at my top 3 stressors, I can take the first, capacity, and say that's not in my control. I have too much to do, and everything needs to get done. I don't know if you guys had a week like this, but I've had weeks where I go, everybody's asking me for everything, and everything's priority number 1. There is no delegating. There is no priority number 2. No, everything is that priority number 1, and it needs to get done yesterday. But if I break that down, there are actually pieces I can't control. So if my boss emails me and says he needs something done by the end of the day, I probably have to do it. It's outside my control. Job responsibilities that I got hired for, they're probably outside my control. Timelines, like I said before, I might be able to at least influence. Sometimes someone sets a deadline for work or an expectation for work that can feel like it's out of your control, but a lot of times it's kind of arbitrary or flexible, and it's always helpful to check. So that's one thing that I've gotten in the habit of doing is if my supervisor, I've actually asked a lot of them to start putting when something is due on it. Because if you email me, hey Maya, I need you to check I'm gonna go, oh, I have to do that right now because they asked for it and they need it like right now. But in reality, if I'd asked, they'd be like, oh, you can get that done, anytime within the next 2 weeks. And voila, that piece of stress is finally like gone from me instead of me rushing around to get it done. So always ask, like, what's driving this? Is it real? Is it an arbitrary deadline? Now, as a reminder, next, there's things you can directly change. That's the sphere of your control. And there's things that are negotiable. You can't directly decide them, but you can influence the timing or the length or the how. I'm going to have you guys pair up with a partner. And you're going to be in the same groups as you were before to talk through your spheres of influence control with one of your stressors. So you're going to help each other unpack pieces you might have control or influence over. Someone who's not in that particular situation can help us sometimes see things more objectively instead of kind of like that emotional stress feeling that we get. And they'll help you find parts you might just need to accept and not spend any more energy on. So we're going to be in those breakout rooms for how long? For how long should I put them in breakout rooms?
Somewhere between 6 to 7 minutes.
All right, so we're going to be in breakout rooms for, I'm going to say 6 minutes. You guys are going to talk about your list of stressors and help each other figure out what they can control or influence about one of those stressors. And then when we come back, I'm going to ask 1 or 2 people to share out anything that came up for them in the conversation. All right, breakout rooms are open. Go ahead and join. I don't like that the voice comes on every single time I push the recording button. I wish it would just come on once and be done with it, and that's just me. So it's kind of a creepy voice, but
Fortunately, that's outside our sphere of influence.
Don't even stress out about it.
Did anything come up for you guys in these combos? Did people help you figure out one of your main stressors, what's within your control, what's within your influence, and everything else?
You may have to volunteer someone.
Monica's off mute, so I'm not sure if she's volunteering herself or if she's just off mute on accident. You want to share, Monica?
Yeah, well, I will. I mean, of course, I was telling Chrissy that our payroll system has been causing us a lot of stress. So the good thing is we are getting a new system. But it has been stressful for months for us because a lot of things have not worked for us, and it's causing us to go back and redo things over again. I think 2 payrolls ago, I had to start over 6 times. That was stressful.
That's stressful.
Yes. So, like I said, the good thing is we're getting a new system, so I'm hoping things will be better.
So is getting the new system within your area of control? Are you like buying it, or did you like influence somebody to get it, or what happened with that?
I'm sorry, you're cutting in and out on me.
Are you the one purchasing a new system? Like, do you get to decide which system you guys move to, or?
Well, yes. My boss is actually, she was in charge of the new system. Yes, we've been trying to get them for a while, and then finally, it was decided that HR was going with a new payroll benefit system. Yes. And we are excited.
That's good. So you guys got to leverage it. I bet the idea that you guys were having to spend so much time on it probably played a little bit into leverage for getting a new system. It's a lot of time if you've got to redo it 6 times over.
Yeah. And it's been bad for really bad for the past 2 or 3 months. It really has.
Mm-hmm.
So
thanks for sharing.
You're very welcome.
Anyone else want to share one of your stressors?
Maya, I'll share a little bit from my discussion with Jenna, if that's all right. I think one thing, we were hitting on some big stressors for her. It's her work, especially around gun violence. And for me, it's my work with schools and all the pressure that they're under in that environment we work in. But one thing that I think I realized that I didn't quite understand before in this way was, we can't really control those particular things very much. They really feel like they're out of our control. Like for me, the way a school operates or the way a school district runs itself is I have very little influence on, but that's the environment I work in. But what I can do, my sphere of influence, and what's exciting is the thing about the individuals I work with. So the people that are affected by that system, or in the case of Jenna, the people who are affected by the gun violence, she can work directly with, and that's our sphere of influence, is supporting those people, giving them agency, finding ways to empower them and support them, advocate for them. So that was kind of a revelation for me.
Yeah, I think it's always good with the big issues. I'd always remind myself when I was working as a teacher and I would see big issues in my students' lives, I'd be like, you're one person. You're not going to be able to fix this huge systemic thing. But you can make this child's life a little better for the time that they're in your classroom. That's a big thing that the sphere of influence and sphere of control tends to help us when we do this kind of activity, is that it takes the big stressors and makes them, okay, so what can I control about this? What can I personally change about this? And being able to control something is very calming on the stress, fight or flight response of humans, because we do something about it.
Yeah. Can I piggyback on that a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that we think about in our work, especially in our theory of change, is this idea of all change starting with the individual. Even as we think about strengths, is that once we are able to uncover the strengths, once we're able to get people to understand what their strengths are, it's the idea that they're able to use that to be able to impact others around them, right? And then we create these strength-based teams. But ultimately, the things that we have under our control are the things that we can like ultimately start within ourselves. And I think that probably plays out in most large systems or most large issues that we all have in our lives, is this idea that we can start what may feel small, but that's starting small or starting with ourselves or starting with the individuals can have a huge impact on everything else. And so maybe we don't go and fight the system immediately. We go and work with the individuals within that system that we have some level of influence on and begin to have impact there. And then before you know it, that everything else is impacted by the work that we're able to do with those individuals, which can sometimes be stressful, but it actually can lower your level of stress if you're like trying to fight the big machine immediately. So yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. Maya, I hate to jump in on your part. Sorry.
I love it. You never jump in with shallow things. You always have really good insights to jump in with. So I appreciate it. The next activity is going to be the hero's journey, and Phil's going to walk you through a gratitude practice.
Yeah. So this next intervention is all about the hero's journey, and this will be specifically personal to me, but I actually want to start this with a cartoon. One of my favorite cartoons as a child was Charlie Brown, and it was all about this idea of, Charlie Brown consistently had just a really rough life. But one day Linus said, worrying won't stop the bad stuff from happening. It just stops you from enjoying the good part, right? And I mean, this is true. And this is something that we teach in our work all the time, is the idea of negativity bias, the idea of ultimately making this shift towards a strength-based perspective. That's literally what this is in real life. It's so easy to feel grateful in life when everything is good, right? But what do you do when disaster strikes? That's when really the gratitude is worth it. There's been a number of studies that have showed that in the face of serious trauma, adversity, and suffering, if people have a grateful disposition, they'll recover more quickly. And that has nothing to do with feelings. It's more about the choice that they make to be grateful in a situation that may feel really, really tough, really, really hard. Dr. Robert Emmons, the world's leading scientific expert on gratitude, says that processing a life experience through a grateful lens doesn't mean denying negativity. It's not this form of superficial happyology. Instead, it means realizing the power you have to transform an obstacle into an opportunity. It means reframing a loss into a potential gain. It means recasting negativity into positive channels for gratitude. And, when I first heard this 2-3 years ago, I didn't believe it. Actually, I thought that it was just like kind of hogwash. And, you start to think about all the things that happen to people, and you're like, a little bit, you feel like it's kind of like, ugh, not really. But this idea of consciously cultivating an attitude of gratitude builds this psychological immune system that can cushion us when we fall, right? And there's scientific evidence that grateful people are more resilient to stress, whether it's minor everyday hassles or major personal upheavals. And so this activity that I really want to walk through today is this idea called the hero's journey, right? And what I want you to do is we're going to start with identifying 1 or 2 situations that were really tough for you. I just mentioned earlier about Robert Emmons and me thinking that this was a little bit of hogwash at first. This was like 3 years ago when I first heard this work or these findings. And I was in a space in life where I just didn't agree. I hadn't had an experience where I felt like that actually worked. And then I experienced some major tragedies in my life. So about 2019, I lost my dad and my son, probably within 2 weeks, like a 2-week time period. And it was probably the most traumatic experience I'd ever experienced in my life. And I didn't know what to do in this particular situation. right? And so that was a situation that was extremely, extremely tough for me. And one of the things that I did to overcome that moment was actually get up every day, put on my boots, and walk my dog. And when I was walking my dog, I would think about all of the things that I was feeling, and I would experience those feelings, whether it snowed, whether it rained, whether the sun was shining, whether it was cold, no matter what, I would get up and I would walk my dog for 20 minutes every day. And what I realized is that even though I'm feeling all of this stress, even though I'm feeling probably the hardest thing that I've ever been through in my entire life, I had a choice to get up every day, put on my boots, and walk outside, which means I still had the opportunity to get up every day, put on my boots, walk outside, and be thankful. And sometimes I will be thankful and it will make me sad and I will cry. And sometimes I will be thankful and it will make me laugh and I will think about the good things that I've had and the good times that I had and the good memories that I had. And that's the point of strengths. That's the point of being resilient. It's the space where you are where it's the hardest and you have the ability to still think that this too not only will pass, but I will be better for it. There are so many things that have happened since then that have been great, that have been bad, but I will say that there are specific strengths that I've been able to use as I've walked through this hard part of my life. And now here I am, 3 years later, probably stronger than I've ever been in my life, thinking that I'm stronger than I've ever been in my life. And it's only because I was able to not just leverage strengths, but because I was able to make a consistent decision to be grateful even when it sucked. And it wasn't that the feelings made it okay. It was the decision that I made to be grateful for just a moment to continue forward. And so what I want you to do is I want you to take 90 seconds to think about the tough situations that you've had in your life, right? These could be the really tough situations. They don't have to be like really crazy situations. They could just be like, you know, I was really studying for a test, right? So write down that situation. And I want you to say, what did you do to overcome that moment? And then think about what strengths you used and how you might tap into them going forward when you face moments that are stressful. Now, whenever I look at a stressful situation, I'm like, I can handle it. That is literally the thing that I think to myself anytime that I'm in a situation that's stressful, is that I can handle it. I've been through really hard things. This may not be the hardest thing. Or if I'm in a really tough situation, I know that I've been through tough situations before. And if you continue to tell yourself and make a choice that you can handle it, things change. So what is your hero's journey? What is the thing that you are conquering? What is the thing that you feel like you can overcome or have overcome? And what strengths have you used? It's pretty quiet, so I'll play a little bit of music while we spend the rest of this 90 seconds together. I'm gonna give you 30 more seconds, only because I really like this song.
If you're playing music, I can't hear it.
Oh, you can't hear it? So I'm the only person.
You have your own little dance party over there.
Yeah. Can you hear it now?
It's very low.
Okay. So that should be about enough time to reflect on a moment that you had that was a tough situation for you. And what I'm looking for is about 3 people to share their personal hero journey. What was it? What did you do to overcome it? What strengths did you use? And then what lesson did you learn from that particular situation and how will you use it moving forward? Who's going to share? You know me, I'm not afraid to call on people.
So we'll volunteer somebody.
Well, was that somebody else?
No, go ahead.
Okay, well, I'm kind of, my hero journey is a little like yours, Bill. So I lost my husband unexpectedly. So I am an only parent of 3 girls. So that was my situation. That was 6 years ago. What I did to overcome that moment is I just really tried to, again, I'm just tried to be resilient and look at the positive parts of my life and what I needed to do to make sure my girls continued to have a happy life and you know, did fun things, tried to stay positive, never really let myself or allowed myself to get down in the yucky parts of all of that, although I do have them, don't get me wrong, but just tried to stay in the moment and continue to make memories. The strengths, you know, I have a lot. I could probably just keep writing them, but I think some of the biggest ones was courage, bravery, and leadership, because I had to become the only parent to 3 very challenging girls that are, you know, I've got twins for one, and so I get overwhelmed these days because my oldest is leaving for college in a week as of today. It's going to be really kind of hard to let her go. It's kind of like we have this very firm cement. We're in a good place, and it's going to be cracked a little with her leaving us. But just trying to look at all the positives that have happened to us in the past 6 years after losing Todd.
Yeah. Chrissy, I thank you for sharing that. That's a huge deal. And I applaud you for being able to do what you have done and what you're continuing to do. I also would encourage you to begin to celebrate this moment, because it's a big deal. You know what I mean?
We've been celebrating, don't worry.
Okay.
Well, and Chrissy, Chrissy, I remember you telling me stories. I think about Halloween being a really big holiday for you guys, right?
Yeah, it still is. Yeah.
And I remember when I heard that, I thought, how beautiful of you to bring your zest, share your zest and creativity with your daughters like that.
Yeah, those are other ones. See, I could just keep going down, but yeah.
And they're so lucky to have you. And I'm sure you'll find a way to do Halloween, from afar with your daughter in college.
Well, she's going to UC, and you know that's the Halloween party, or not UC, sorry, OU, and that's the Halloween party school. Like she's already said, like it's a 3-day. She needs a costume for all 3 days, but I don't want to take too much time. But really quick, during COVID, again, creativity. A lot of what we did is we had themed dinners, and so we literally had Halloween like at least once or twice a week. And again, I have these memories. I'm going to have to make myself just a scrapbook of just our themed dinners, because we did Harry Potter, Star Wars. We did the Tiger King. That was the best one. We're all, if anybody's watched that, we were all characters from the Tiger King, and we looked dead on them. I look at the picture every day, and it makes me laugh. It's on my refrigerator. But we did Disney Day. I mean, it was just probably 20 or 30 themed dinners during lockdown, and just had a ton of fun. And everyone's like, where did you get all this stuff? I'm like, my basement. We just put things together and had themed dinners.
Nice. That is awesome. That is awesome. But the thing about this that I want you to remember is that not only have you made it through the moment, but you've like thrived in spite of, right? And what I would encourage any person who has experienced anything is that when you are in a moment that is tough, remember the moment that you have victory, right? That you've overcome. When you think about American culture, when you think about the culture of human beings, we celebrate all of our holidays are literally times that have been probably the worst moments in history. When you think about the 4th of July, you think about Memorial Day, you think about Juneteenth, You think about all of the holidays that we celebrate, it is literally us celebrating a moment when we overcame a really tough moment, a really tough time in history. And isn't that what it's made for? I guess when you think about it, it allows us to be able to take a moment and say, you know what, we can get through anything. That's resilience. Is that even though it was hard, even though it hurt, we made it. And that's the whole point of it. That's why I encourage you to do your hero's journey. So listen, I can take all day talking about this particular hero's journey. I want one more person to share, and then we'll go on to the next stress buster or stress strategy. I know somebody has something.
I'll just share brief.
Okay.
I think just overcoming my childhood in general. So I grew up in the 80s and 90s in New York City in the projects during the crack epidemic and hip hop.
Yeah.
So had a lot going on in our neighborhood, and hip hop was a saving grace, I think, to a lot of the violence that we experienced because the crack epidemic just destroyed families.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look back at that to where I am now, successful, living in Cincinnati, it was a journey. It was absolutely a journey, going from, wearing box cutters and, shank knives to protect myself at 13, 14 years old to not even thinking about those things anymore. And when I think back to what got me through, and I think about my three strengths, my three number one strengths, they all were equal when I took the test, is spirituality, love of learning, and leadership. And so at the time, I won't necessarily say I had a strong relationship with God, but I did believe that there was something bigger than me. Mm-hmm. And I maintained optimism and positivity around, like, I counted down the days I was leaving. So there was something calling me to a higher purpose. Now with my spiritual growth, I get what that is, but in the moment, I just was always drawn to something more and something bigger. Love of learning, education is what got me out, right? I actually came to Cincinnati to go to Xavier University. I was always an A student. I loved to learn. I loved school. I loved being in a learning social environment. And so, that got me out. And then the last, leadership, it's easy to give into the environment that you are growing up in. And as a leader, I chose to take the more lonely pathway of doing it different than what I saw a lot of my friends doing. And so when I think back to my journey and my hero story, I really those strengths just pop up time and time again as the things that keep me moving forward and persevering and pushing through all of the adversity that I've experienced in my life.
That is outstanding. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That is outstanding. I'm very familiar with the 80s and 90s and the time that it was and the impact that it's had on people. And for you to be here, standing on the other side of that, saying what impact it has had on you and how it has impacted you positively is a testament to who you are and what you've been able to do. Congratulations. Listen, this is a big deal. So thank you for sharing that. This is a really, really, really good part of this session, is that I wish we could just go around the room and everybody share out their story. I'll keep going. I don't want to mess up the flow, but thank you for sharing. Sometimes it just leaves me speechless. So this is what I'll do, is I will let Maya talk about our very next stress buster, which is strengths as energy.
Strengths as energy. When I first heard of this, I was very confused. I'll tell you the truth. The dominant view of stress, the one that I generally have a lot of the time is that stress is bad for me, so I need to get rid of it or avoid it. I shouldn't have it. The reality though is that you can't always get rid of stress, and we know that. You can't always reduce it or avoid it. You might not be able to offload it to someone else. Maybe the assignment is actually due tomorrow and you need to get it done. And sometimes if you avoid stress, it causes bigger stress down the line. So, you know, you avoid paying your bills, so it's going to be more stressful for you later. You don't have the money for you to pay your taxes, and you're like, I don't really want to mess with the IRS. Then it's going to be more stressful for you down the line. It's easier to just kind of hit it head on and see how you can transform it into energy for you. So in the model of using stress as energy, it's shifting your mindset from stress being bad to what things that are stressing me out are actually good and can help me reach my goals. So we've mentioned before, the stress response is hardwired to provide us a spark of energy and make sure that we survive. It's the innate fight or flight that all humans have. So we're going to use that to spark our energy for reaching our goals. And I'm going to give you, again, 2 minutes to write down your to-do list. So let's go back to our stress list. I want you to look at every one of the items on your list and ask yourself, how can I use this for energy? So where do I have control, influence, leverage in the situation? What specific actions can I take? What are my strengths? What resources do I have? What allows me to know that I can handle this? So two of my examples from the beginning of our session were managing 2 very high energy dogs and 2 staying home all the time. So those 2 things are not going away anytime soon. As much as they annoy me, I'm not giving away my dogs. They're going to live with me and my husband. And as much as I may want to go travel everywhere and do everything, at the moment, I'm working from home. So what can I do? What are the strengths that I can pull on? What are the resources that I can use to handle the situation? So for me, the 2 strength strategies that I used for these, the first one was teamwork. So managing dogs. My sister happens to be a wonderful dog sitter, house sitter. So the second we all got vaccinated, I was like, can you come over and walk my dogs for me like a day in the afternoon, like 2 days a week? Just to kind of get that off my plate for a second. So I didn't get rid of the dogs as much as I like. That's an inside joke. I told my husband at the beginning of the month we needed to get rid of the dogs. And he was like, Maya, you love your dogs and you're only saying this because you've been in the same house with them for 18 months. If you calm down, you're going to realize that once you give away your dogs, you're going to miss them. And he was right. So the strength that I pulled on was teamwork. And I also asked, people that I are in my life that I know are safe. Hey, could I come over to your house for a little bit and create my dog so they can get kind of used to me being out of the house again, and that separation anxiety doesn't ratchet up as high for them. The second one, staying home or working from home, I've been working in office, but I've also been using my creativity and my appreciation of beauty and excellence to find different places around the house and around the yard that I can work from. So I've worked from my living room with the record player going, and I've worked on my porch in the front, and I've worked out in the yard and back. And that's given me that good boost of energy that I've needed. And it's also taken some of that stress away from staring at the same 4 walls. So some of these things you're going to have to get a little creative with and find ways that you have control or influence. Find any specific actions you can take. And what are the strengths you're going to use to get through them? So go ahead and write them down with your stressors list. About 30 more seconds. All right. Yeah, I have 1 to 2 people share out. What's one of the strength strategies you're going to use? And what are the specific actions you can take with that stressor? I will volunteer somebody. All right, Mr. Mike, do you want to share one of your stressors and what are the strengths you're going to use and the specific actions you can take?
Yeah, I think one of my stressors that has been exacerbated probably over the last 6 months more so than previous is the amount of change going on at work. You know, as we thought we were calming down from COVID, the conversations were, what are the lessons learned? What you know, what's not going to be the same? What will go back to normal? And what can we roll out that'll, you know, what's not going away, and how do we change our programs and all of that, right? So, I mean, the good news is a lot of that, and I'm in the position where I can make a lot of those decisions and be a part of those conversations. The bad part is I get to make the decisions and I'm in a lot of those conversations. So the stress sometimes comes from I'm the one responsible for driving the change, for making this. And the good thing is that's there, but there are so many things outside of our control right now that that's the stress. Or it's like, I just got something working and now the USDA says we can't do that anymore, or whatever. So one of the things that I think I've learned more so is to not adapt how I approach problem solving, especially planning and development. Like, I always used to be very detailed from step 1 to step 40, and I've gotten a lot better at, like, let's not let perfect get in the way of good. If I'm better off today than I was yesterday, then I've done my job. Because it'll take me 3 weeks to plan something, and by the time we roll out, my plan's been obsoleted 4 different times. So I think part of it is just really deliberately trying to change my perspective on things. And probably the other one is I'm almost like toxically good at having a terrible attitude and finding problems, and not good at those gratitude things. And so I like that reframing is something I've been intentional with, is like, well, I didn't get everything I wanted, or we should have done this 6 months ago, or whatever that is. It's, well, we're doing it today. We're better off today than we were yesterday. And so I think just trying to be mindful of being positive has helped a lot. Because like when I wrote my stressors, there's not many that I can say are chronic, which I think underscores a good thing. And it's just one acute thing after another, which while it can be overwhelming at times, it's more than I can say where I was at this time last year.
That a sense of like just a snowball of acute ones. Also the stress of having to be the person who makes the decisions. Yeah, something
to me, that's the energizing type of stress. I like that's what I'm passionate about work, not the governance. Let me make sure budgets are being met and contracts are being, like, that's part of the job, but I really do like being partly removed, being responsible and doing that. So while it's stressful, it's that if that's the 10% of my job, I could make it be 90. That's what I like. So that's not too stressful for me, thankfully.
Well, that's good. All right, our last activity I'm gonna have Phil lead you guys through is resilience through purpose, and it's all about relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. As always, I always end up running really close to the 4:30 or the end time. So I'm gonna fly through this, right? This next intervention is literally all about relationships. And I've talked about this before, and we've talked about this through the entire thing, is that the quality of relationships with other people influence how emotionally resilient you can be in the face of an emotional or physical crisis. So in general, the more quality social support you can draw upon from family and friends, from coworkers, from colleagues, the more flexible and resilient you can be in stressful situations. So let's just jump right into it. So resilience through purpose. In a study on building resilience in medical students who have a stressful work experience, the authors identified that the connections to colleagues, patients, and professions is fundamental to resilience, highlighting this idea of social resilience as a key factor in overall well-being. And then high levels of well-being are correlated with greater stress resilience and less burnout. So here are 3 ways to strengthen connection and spark more positive emotions and meanings, and 2 things that we know will help buffer against stress. So the first thing, when you were looking to like develop your resilience through purpose through other people and creating these social relationships, is to ultimately strength spot a coworker, right? You use SBI to make sure that your appreciation is specific and meaningful. The second thing is to challenge yourself to do something kind for someone else, or think about those people that you serve, right? In all the work that we do, most of us here are in nonprofit organizations. And when you're thinking about the work that you do, it's ultimately for someone else to impact them in a positive way. So think about how you are servicing them and what impact you are having on those folks. And then finally, think about your mission, right? Share a moment with your team or with your colleagues in a meeting, and reflect on what excited you about working in this organization in the first place. Think about yourself from the perspective of what you do aligns with the mission of your organization. Again, this idea of aligning with the mission, thinking about the people that you serve, and also creating great relationships with your coworkers, all will have an impact on your level of resilience because of the relationships that you're able to create, and also the impact that you're able to have on all the people inside of your organization. So, and also the people that are you. so yeah, that's resilience through purpose. I flew through that because I wanted to make sure that we got to the final parts of this. And Maya, I'm gonna let you take this over and take us on home. I know that we have a short amount of time, so I wanted to make sure that we got through it.
Thank you. So tailoring resilience actions to you, we took these 4 activities and put common character strengths that could help you fulfill those activities. However, I want to stress, pun intended, that these are not the only strengths that you can use for these activities. So to reframe stress, these strengths: perspective, self-regulation, judgment, honesty, prudence, fairness, they may be commonly helpful or particularly helpful to reframe stress. But if you have a strength that you want to tap into for one of these activities that isn't listed on the screen, feel free to do it and go for it. It's really being able to take these steps and these actions and make them tailored to you, to your strengths, to your strong points. I see some people trying to like write down the strengths and activities. This whole session is being recorded and it's going to get sent out to the workshop, the network. So you guys will have this information and have to write it down on your board. The next thing that I'm going to ask you guys, the last question I'm going to have for you guys, is which of the 4 strategies will you use and how will you use it? So if one person wants to come off and say which of the 4 strategies they're going to use and how they will use it, or just type it in chat.
There's ways to throttle. I know we said the takeout method. I know somebody came off from mute.
Someone came off mute. I'm not sure if they want to answer. So I'm gonna let you guys answer this one in the chat if you guys want to, but I do want you guys to be thinking through the 4 strategies and which one you're going to use, because these are really good strategies. They're not the only strategies, but there are possible options for you to use to boost your resiliency and help you manage stress. Next thing that we're talking about, because it's going to be stress reduction and stress management. It's kind of the theme, and building resiliency is the theme of our month of August events. So our couch conversation is next Thursday, August 19th at 10:30. Going to be building resilience in your team. We'll be talking with Natalie Boyne, PhD, who's the SVP of Marketing and Customer Experience at Scholastic, and Charles Hill, CTA, the Vice President of Operations and Programming at the Columbus Urban League. These couch conversations are always dynamic and interactive. Phil is our host for those, and Phil just does a great job of asking them insightful questions, and it's usually a really good time filled with deep insights. So you don't want to miss that one. That's next Thursday. The next thing is the Strong Cincinnati Cohort 13. It's starting in October in the fall. It is our 13th cohort of organizations. So if you have an organization, a nonprofit, or a business that you think would be a great fit for the Institute, go ahead and tell them about us, send them an application link. There's a link to the application in the monthly network newsletter that went out. And if you don't have that, you can email us for the link to the application. And then I put it in chat earlier. I'm going to put it in chat again, but we rely on you guys' feedback so much. It helps us get better. It helps us do our job better, and it helps us reach the people in our network. So take a minute and go ahead and fill out that survey. It's about, I think it's 3 to 4 minutes it should take. It's really quick multiple choice answers. And go ahead and fill that out for today. As always, thank you guys for coming. We hope to see you guys soon. We're glad you're in the network.
Thank you all.
Have a great